Welcome to Pub in the Desert, where we bring you honest, curious conversations about faith and the human experience. I'm Matthias Miller, here with my co-host, Kevin David Krittner. So before we dive in, once again, I want to recap our three rules of engagement. First, you don't need to be known. Sorry, you don't need to be fixed. You need to be known. Let's get it right. We believe love is knowing and being known. Second, we approach difficult topics with genuine curiosity. We're not here to win arguments, but to understand. And then third, we're not coming here with preset agendas. We let conversations unfold naturally, following where authenticity leads us. So go ahead, pull up a chair, grab a drink. Let's explore what union looks like with God, with others, with ourselves. So, Kevin, I love the question that you ask, which is, what adventure are we going on today?
Right. Let's see where it takes us.
Let's see where it takes us. One of the things that I was on my has been on my mind this past week. You made a post about purpose that I found really intriguing because I've been in a lot of different spaces. I've paid coaches, I've read books, I've been in seminars, I've done events, I've done all kinds of things that have centered around purpose. And none of them talked about the concept of purpose that you mentioned in your post, which is really bizarre.
Well, you know that I'm a word guy and I like definitions.
Yep.
So so when you use a term like purpose, my first question is, well, what do you mean by that? How do you define purpose?
Well, that ends up being a complicated question.
Aren't they all?
Aren't they all? Like, there's million and one ways you can define it. You can define purpose as utilitarian. Like, what's the purpose of a hammer? Well, to pound in nails.
Right.
Um, it's a fairly discouraging way to look at people.
What's that old saying? Like to a hammer, the whole world is nails, or something like that.
Um, to some people, the whole world is a certain type of thing as well.
Right. It's an opportunity.
It's an opportunity.
Oh, I was talking to my friend this morning, not to derail us, we'll get back to it, but he
We
was
will.
talking about these, maybe we will, maybe we won't. He was talking about these get rich quick schemes, that kind of stuff. And I was like, I saw this ad on YouTube, and it's this lady, and she says, "Why is Amazon paying me 20,000 a month?" I'm like, come on, please. And there are people that are like, hey, like if they're gonna pay me 20,000 a month, why not? Let's investigate this. It's just an interruption to the video I'm watching. I hit skip as quickly as I possibly can. But so the purpose of those videos is
Is, well, when the world is an opportunity, you never know what lies on the other side.
right,
But
right.
I think the question that's plagued me more with purpose is like, I'm actually not concerned about purpose from a utilitarian standpoint. I'm concerned about purpose from, I mean, you use the term ache, but like there's some kind of existential cry of some kind that needs to be answered. And the best way that anybody's known, anybody that I've known anybody to articulate it, in that space is purpose. And then effectively, what you do is you take any promise of, okay, what's your why? What's your unique ability? What's your million and one things that we package it as? We assume that it's an answer for the ache. And where my mind went with some of the stuff, which we've had conversations before, but there's like self-help is ends up in that lens ends up becoming a treadmill.
Yep, yep. Wow. The ache is powerful, right? The ache that we feel. It's a powerful thing. The longest time I thought I was the only one that felt it. Because there wasn't much open conversation, at least in my realm, about it. And I'd talk about it. And I actually felt it as a physical sense. Like it was right below my heart and above my stomach. Like what is that, the solar plexus? Like that space? I don't know what they call it, but yeah. We're not experts here by any stretch of the imagination on anatomy or but I play one on TV.
Exactly. This will be this will be in the
We have to
post-show research.
right, right. But I would feel it. And like originally I thought it was like diet. Like, okay, am I just not getting enough calories? Like, and then like I'd eat a certain way, change my habits, exercise, all that kind of stuff. It's like it's still there, and nobody I was talking to could explain where it was coming from. The doctors had no idea, all anybody I talked to, and I started to recognize a number of years ago, like it's deeper than that. It's not physiological. Like this is spiritual. This is emotional. Like there's something there. And it's about existence. It's about how I operate in this world and whether I see myself as purposeful. There's a longing for purpose. How I used to define that. If I start going too far off on a tangent, bring me back.
Let's go.
Right. So how I used to define purpose was really, if I'm honest, I've only come to this realization recently. This is a very vulnerable moment. My purpose was all around resources. It was all around providing. And if I could provide on a given day, then I would be purposeful. If I couldn't provide on a certain day, then I wouldn't be purposeful. And if I'm honest, that's what drove me for the longest time. That was my purpose. Uh, I was a believer. I would talk about God constantly, still vastly fascinated with it, but as it wasn't as intimate as it's become over this discussion around purpose.
There's a lot of interesting threads to pull with this one. I think it's interesting. I mean, it's very easy to make the assumption that if nobody else is talking about it, they must not be experiencing it. And
Mhm.
that, especially when I don't know that I have a physiological location in my body where I experience it. It probably for me, I would have experienced it more as an emotional, like an overwhelming emotional state.
Mhm.
Um, but it's very easy to assume that if it's such a strong felt experience and other people aren't talking about it, therefore I must be the only one experiencing it.
Right,
Instead of wondering whether this is a more universal experience.
right, right, right. And maybe there's a reason why we're not talking about it. There's a very understandable reason why we're not talking about it. And I don't pretend to know what the answer to that is, but
Well, I mean, we can make assumptions. It's very uncomfortable to. I mean, I feel like I've spent much of my life trying to find the answer to it, and it's very uncomfortable to say it's very comfortable to rationalize that I'm starting this business because fill in the blank. I'm getting married because I fell in love with this wonderful woman and we're going to live happily ever after. And we're starting this podcast because fill in the blank. Like, here's this vision. So let me paint the grand vision. That's
Mhm.
very comfortable. Those are very comfortable reasons. And I think it takes a period of time for the bottom to fall out, a lot of honesty. So it takes a good bit of pain and a large amount of honesty to say, no, really, the reason why I'm taking another college degree or whatever it is,
Yeah,
said addiction of choice, is that I have an incurable ache that I don't know how to solve any other way. And I'm hoping that this next thing will be the thing that finally solves it.
right, right. And it's all an internal conversation,
Correct.
right? The thing that strikes me in the midst of that, as you were talking about it, is the incredible amount of loneliness present in that. Like that level of existential ache, longing, whatever, and it's not being communicated. It reminds me of Carl Jung's definition of loneliness. It's like it's not about having people around. It's about the thing that you have to say that's important to say that you either don't say or when you say, it's disregarded.
Yes.
Like that level of loneliness. We talk about, and certainly COVID and what happened during that really elevated loneliness because we're isolated from people and we're made for connection. But I wonder if that just wasn't the trigger that really flipped it into high gear. 'Cause they're already lonely. Despite the promises of technology, and a million and one people talk about this, so we don't need to belabor the point. But we're supposed to be connected. We're supposed to be more integrated. We're all larger global community we talked about. But what I see with the people that I talk to, like they're more lonely than they've ever been. Depression rates are higher, anxiety rates are higher, suicide rates are higher. Like all these things that tell us that we as human beings are not functioning well are all going up. Loneliness.
Well, and I think so. So then you have a compounding problem because I had people try to label what this thing was for me who
Mm,
didn't understand what it was.
yeah,
And they were doing their best to, I'm going to assume, be helpful. A- and so if you, it's one thing to be in a world and have something to express that if you would just open your mouth and share, people would understand. But it's a whole other thing to open your mouth and express something and just get blank stares, criticizing stares, deep questioning responses. Like, I mean,
right.
in a faith community context, and the question is, well, are you giving up on your faith? Are you like, what's wrong with you?
Yeah, yeah. And it all seems to follow a certain pattern too. Like when you first start talking, oh, it's almost like a patronizing. I've been there. I've seen that. You'll grow out of it, kind of thing. And then if you keep asking questions, then the debate comes. And if you keep asking questions, then the subtle gossiping around happens. And then if you keep asking questions, then all of a sudden it's like he's dangerous. Keep him out of here. Yeah, man. Yeah.
And so
And
then
just makes us lonely.
it's
Makes us
just
lonely.
lonely.
I was in Texas a number of years ago, and one of my buddies loves this the singer. His name's Jason Upton. Um, Pretty big in the Christian music circles, kind of thing. And he was playing at this church, and so we went. And Jason Upton from the stage just happened to be talking about social media, and he's a very down to earth guy. And he's like, he asked the question. He's like, the problem with social media? I'm like, oh, here we go. I'm like sitting up straight. He goes, it's someone you're not doing something you're not in a place you're not. And you're spending your entire time living vicariously through these people and believing that that's like where you should be. Like that should be your purpose to get to that place.
Yeah,
You're like, okay. That'll make you lonely right there.
that would make it lonely right there. Well, if you want to get really sinister with this, which I don't know that you have to,
Which
but
we do.
which we do, um, like the there's an incentive. There's an incentive. You and I have had conversations about this in the past. There's an incentive to create dependency, to create need from people who are helping others. There's a reason why I want to give you, I don't want to solve the ache for you. I don't want to solve the disconnection. If I solve the issue of disconnection, then social media goes away. I mean, what is there at that point? It's just you're spending time with your friends.
Right.
Um, if I solve the ache, do you have a reason? I mean, like, do you have a reason to come to church? Do you ever have a reason to buy my books? Do you have a reason to pay me for counseling, therapy, coaching, mentoring, any kind
Right.
of seminars, workshops, and any kind of knowledge?
Yeah.
And so if you optimize a system for self-preservation, the system is going to optimize away from solving the ache because you
Oh.
can't control people who've let me I think you have more perspective in it, and this is very much a leading question, but talk to
Lead
me
on.
about what you've observed in people's ability to be controlled and manipulated once the ache is solved versus once it's unsolved.
Right. Well, I think the question answers itself. Controlled and manipulated when the ache is present is is best case scenario.
Yeah.
Continue continue creating the ache.
Mhm.
That's it. You solve the ache as if anybody, I don't think there is a solving of the ache. I think there's acknowledging it and accepting. Maybe I should go back around this path and then I'll bring it back around. Maybe the ache is holy.
Mm.
Maybe the ache is a holy thing. Maybe we acknowledge on a very, very fundamental level inside us that we were meant for union. And everywhere we look, purpose drives us away to build the company, to get married, to have the kids, to have the perfect life, to write the book, to whatever it is. And the ache's still there. And the ache draws us back to something true, something real. It causes us to be curious, to investigate where is this coming from. And I personally believe at the end of that journey is going to be the presence of God saying, this is where the ache is leading you back to union with me. That's where the ache is holy.
Well, in a lot of ways, it's the tethering to him. And it's in the environment I was raised in, there was a lot of fear around what happens when you walk away from him? What happens when you wonder, what if you miss the mark? And it looks very different when you start recognizing that the ache is the ache can only be answered. This is my perspective. I'm open to hear yours, but the ache can only be answered in union and um and will only ever be satisfied in part as long as we experience union in part, which is part of the human experience of being on this earth. But but there's also this paradox as I'm articulating this, I'm realizing there's also this paradox in which the more that you experience union, the more you experience of what is capable, which can also serve to deepen the ache.
Right.
But in a lot of ways, it ends up being the mercy of God to keep us aware, never allowing us to be satisfied with anything besides union and besides Him, which gives us freedom to build.
Well, even that the mercy of God or the grace is interesting to me because it's it's how we were designed. We're designed from the very beginning to be in union, walking in the cool of the evening through the garden, kind of thing. Like, can you just imagine that? There was a time where they were fully in union with God and they had these walks. Like, it's mind blowing. And yet to know that because of our distrust of him. You know, starting in the garden and coming to the present, there's a disconnection. There's a disconnection. My one of my friends was we were talking about Paul on the road to Damascus, right? I saw this rabbi talking on where was it at? Maybe on YouTube. I don't know. Doesn't matter. He was talking about he was asking these questions. He goes, "Did Paul fall off a horse or a donkey?" He asks the question and puts it out there, and I'm racking my brain. I'm like, well, I don't know. And he goes, "Neither. Scripture never says he fell off a horse or a donkey. It says he was knocked off his feet." I'm like, I'm 50 years into this. And he wasn't saying it as a gotcha moment. He was saying it as like before you want to start arguing theology and all this kind of stuff, like let's just make sure we've got a grounding in what's real. So my buddy was talking about, he's like, can you imagine? He said, like, Paul obviously gets knocked off his feet, he's blinded, he's in Damascus, Ananias is sent to him, his sight is restored, and he hears like he's the only one who hears this conversation, right, between him and Jesus. Paul, why are you persecuting me? Kind of thing. Do you think that Paul at a certain point wasn't like, I'm the only one who heard that? Was that really God?
Hmm.
Kill him. You think you're not going to, as a human being, start questioning? And as you're being lowered in a basket out of the wall, and as Galatians 1 says that he says he didn't go right back to Jerusalem because they didn't trust him, and the followers of Jesus didn't trust him, the establishment didn't trust him. So Galatians 1 says he went off to Arabia. And what did he experience out there? Or take Moses. He runs away and he leaves everything behind. He's a Jew, clearly, but he's been raised in the Egyptian system. It's in his bones. It's in his marrow. Like that's all he's known, and he has to leave that. What do you think happened in those 40 years in the desert? I think he was just tending sheep and getting married and having children. Yes, certainly that was part of it. But the life of a shepherd is very lonely. It's just you and the sheep and God. Or
Yeah.
David tending the flocks of his family. All that kind of stuff. What do you think happened in those places? Do you think identity wasn't restored there? It had to have been. The guy who ran away from Egypt and the guy who comes back and says, "Let my people go," is not the same man. The guy who's responsible for a flock of sheep and then the guy who's responsible for millions of people leading them out of Egypt, different guy.
So was it the removing of all the supporting props? Was it the aloneness? Was it the like what? It just makes me curious, and maybe we don't know. Maybe
Right.
like
Yeah.
what's the process that
Or
shapes?
or Hosea's wife, right?
Yeah.
Chapter 2. I'm going to lead her out into the desert and there I'm going to speak tenderly to her. He tells us that's what's going to happen. But what does it actually look like? Or John the Baptist, whose dad is part of the temple system. You ever find that fascinating that his dad is part of the temple system and he ends up being in a scene, completely rejecting the system, living out in the desert? What relational dynamic went on there?
I think what's intriguing is the radical faith that like Like as humans, we take a lot of security from people who think the way that we think.
Right. Now go out into the desert. Well, as John says, Jesus was led out into the desert to be amongst the wilderness and the wild animals by himself out there. It's a solitude that feels like isolation, and maybe like to bring this back around to purpose. Maybe to get to purpose, we have to go through the desert. Like maybe our identity is forged in the fire of the desert. Because like we hear desert in our current world and we're like, oh yeah, I drive through it in my air-conditioned car. On the way out to Vegas, it's 115 outside, but it's 70 inside my car. I'm good.
Exactly.
But to those people, alone in the desert meant death. Like it was, you were putting your life in your hands to go out into the wilderness on your own. You can't tell me that he's not using that imagery and that metaphor for a very specific reason.
There's something I can't type back exactly what, but there's something that struck me earlier in our conversation about the level of noise with which we bury the ache. And I think it's one of the reasons why spiritual disciplines, any number of things, like even simple things like rest, a weekend off, can be so frustratingly difficult because, I mean, I think there's multiple reasons. I think the world that we live in thrives on our minds being racing,
Yeah.
um,
Being busy, right?
being busy. And part of I mean, ultimately, the desert ends up being a form of detox from human, like mind meld.
Yeah. And painful. I remember when I first started traveling to Africa, way back when, early 2000s, as part of like a missionary group. Um, it was before I had a smartphone. I don't think anybody on our trip had a smartphone, so we had no communication, no email, no text message, no Facebook, no any of that. I noticed like the first 4 or 5 days I was in country, it was a painful detox away from the constant communication, the constant busyness. And I would stay there 2 weeks to a month, just depending on the trip. But I remember detoxing from it and growing, becoming more at peace with it, with the rhythms of what life looked like during that time. And then I remember coming back the first time and walking into a grocery store and seeing all the different types of cereal, hundreds of different boxes of cereal. And I legitimately, it overwhelmed me to the point that I just started crying in the cereal aisle. And it wasn't that I was sad. It was just I was emotional. I had been detoxed from that, and then all of a sudden it hit, and the why it was cereal boxes in the grocery store. It could have been anything, but I'm standing there just weeping in the cereal aisle. That busyness, that connectedness, and I wonder if this may be a side tangent, but here we go.
We love him.
There's a psychologist named Eric Fromm who wrote the early 1900s, and he wrote a book called The Art of Loving. And I read it a few years ago, and I don't believe he's a believer. He never claims to be, but he uses a lot of biblical imagery in his writing, and so who knows? Doesn't matter. But he makes the point that he says the problem with humanity is everybody is running around trying to be lovable, give people a reason to love them, to cure the ache of separation. So while we may not say it, maybe that is our purpose, is to cure the ache of separation by being lovable.
Yeah.
And he says the other option is to be loving. He says that's the honest, that's the true psychologically, emotionally, spiritually healthy path, is to be loving. But most of us are running around trying to make ourselves lovable.
Yeah. Well, and it's so from that perspective, are you loving, like, which comes first? The being lovable, the accepting that you're lovable, or the loving, or is it both entwined?
Oh, wow. You, my viewpoint, in this world, we are taught from the very beginning to be lovable. From the very beginning. Brennan Manning talks about he overheard a pastor talking to a little boy at church, and he says, the pastor says to him, good little boys don't do da 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 da. That was his conditioning in how to be lovable,
Yeah.
where it started. And I think we get so perfectionistic in our desire to be lovable that it leads to self hatred. It inevitably ends up in self hatred. Because to be perfect, to be lovable is to be perfect, essentially, in our world. And you're never getting there.
Yeah.
You're going to make mistakes. Everybody does.
Yeah.
And you keep trying and trying and trying until something clicks and you realize I can't do it and I'm the problem. Not that the standard was off, but that I'm the problem.
And there comes this point at which, for a significant part of your life, you can believe that you can become lovable. Like it's very elusive, but it feels real. And then at some point that breaks down. And I think, isn't part of the experience of the desert coming face to face with forces that you can no longer control?
Yeah. Yep. It becomes real clear. This is outside of my control.
And it's ultimately in that place of surrender where, I mean, that you ultimately have to come to some place of surrender to say, even though I've been conditioned that there's something that I must do, I need to provide today. And I
Yeah.
like that I surrender that despite the fact that I don't feel like I've shown up at my best, whatever that means. I
Right.
don't feel like whatever the thing is, the surrender of even in the moments of weakness, I am going to allow myself the grace of being lovable.
Yeah. I'm going to allow myself to be loved.
And there's also this embrace and acceptance that this is not a destination. It's not an arriving, it's a returning. Like it's just a continual returning. And I've wondered again. I've bought into the lie again that there is some way in which I can achieve being lovable, but I have the choice to return yet again as a wondering person that I am to accepting this.
We talk a lot about the love of Jesus present in the Gospels, and we should, totally should. But do we talk a lot about the times he allowed himself to be loved? Think about the woman who comes into the Pharisee's house, wets his feet with her tears, wipes it with her hair, anoints him, and they're like, oh, That's a year's wages or whatever the amount was, right? Like, you let this woman do this is embarrassing. In that culture, like that was strictly forbidden within that culture. And what I hear him saying, like when he responds to him, is, she's loving me. Allow her to love me. We don't talk about that too often, that he received love. We use it as an object lesson for other things about how loving Jesus is, and that is objectively true, undeniably true. But he's allowing himself to be loved in that moment.
Like I can think of some other situations too, which is like visiting Mary and Martha and Lazarus. Like he's sitting there waiting for them to, well, I mean, waiting for Martha, I suppose, to get everything ready and appreciating Mary's attention.
He
Um,
chose the better thing.
who chose the better thing?
That's
Um,
what he says. She chose the better thing. Talk about busyness versus sitting at his feet versus union, right?
yes.
Object lesson.
It's also really interesting to frame to view when Jesus was out on the boat in the storm with the disciples, because the over responsible, like if we were the savior of the world and we had authority over the storm, would we not make sure that we are the ones awake, that to make sure that nothing like this should happen?
Right.
And I mean, it's more commonly that story is more commonly painted as a picture of the peace that he experienced. But is it not also possible that that's just simply him? I mean, can we look at that from the frame of him receiving love of his disciples are doing their absolute best to take care of him in their limited capacity,
Right.
and he's allowing them to do that?
Yeah. Maybe.
I don't know.
I don't know. It's just interesting. Because really, when he's approached by the teachers of the law and the scribes, says, what's the most important commandment? To love God with everything you are. I'm paraphrasing, obviously, and to love your neighbor as yourself. Well, by the definition of love, to know and be known by God, to know and be known by others, and to know yourself. Like there is a depth to that. There's a depth to that, and we want. I was raised in an environment where it was like the external is what mattered. Were you loving? Were you? It was really, are you a good boy? Are you nice? Are you, all those kinds of things. Not, don't say these words, don't do this thing, all that kind of stuff. But also, can you allow yourself to receive love? It's exchange. It's back and forth. Know and be known by God. Know and be known by others. Know and be known by yourself. It's an exchange.
Well, and even in the exchange, there's kind of an interesting thing there because we talk about self-awareness, but self-awareness does not necessarily equate to self-knowing. I can be aware that my body is breaking down because I've worked three 12-hour shifts, 12-hour shifts 3 days in a row.
Yeah.
That's self-awareness will tell you that. I mean, any level of it. Self-knowing means giving your body the space that it needs to rebound and recover from that,
Right.
which is very
Right.
different. Which,
Yeah. Well, how often do you hear somebody say, it's just who I am? That's awareness of, I know these patterns. And most likely because people have criticized me for having these patterns.
that's fair.
But the knowing is, does it have to be that way? To go a level deeper, just who I am. Okay, I get that. And it is a self-aware thought. I get that. It's almost like you've been forced to admit it.
Right.
Too much experience, that kind of thing. But what about the knowing? Does it have to be that way? Is this a choice I'm making? Or is this beyond me? Maybe that's the awareness that happens in the desert when everything is stripped away and I can no longer just look at God and say, it's who I am.
I mean, it invites deeper questions. Why is it this way? And the question too of, I think it's also often an invitation into ignorance because we might not know. I mean, even the question, do I have to be this way? Maybe it is a simple choice. Maybe it is years of conditioning.
Yeah,
Maybe we don't know what the answer is to all of these questions. And it's far easier just to say, oh, I mean, this is the lizard brain thinking. Like it's far easier just to write it off and say, it's just the way that I am. Now I don't have to think about it anymore. And I don't have to come face to face with the fact that there's something about myself that everybody else sees and I can't explain and I don't know how to deal with.
right, right. When I took Clive out for a walk today, I was listening to I've been listening to the book of Luke in the Mirror Bible translation, which I really like. Um, but there's this moment where Jesus is having a meal at a Pharisee's house. And the Pharisee's thinking, like, he didn't even wash his hands. He didn't ritually purify. And Jesus responds to him and essentially says, well, yeah, the outside of your cup is really clean, but the inside is rotten to the core. And it got me to thinking, like, in that moment, why did that Pharisee not say, I noticed you didn't wash your hands. Is there a reason why?
Hmm.
Why didn't you just frame it as a question? There was a power dynamic going on there. There was something to be protected. Because if he asks that question, then he might get an answer. And that might cause a whole nother line of thinking. Then what do I do? And there's the whole of chapter 11 and into chapter 12. He upsets the Pharisee, and then the scribes and the experts in the law start coming after him like, don't you understand what you've said is offensive to us? And he doubles down. He's like, yeah, I know it's offensive, and you should be offended. You've made monuments to the prophets that your ancestors killed. He like doesn't hold back.
Once suddenly they get the answer that they really were hoping to avoid.
And I think that that's true for us as human beings a lot of the time. Like when we get judgmental, when we get angry, when we do these things, like it's automatic. If you've studied human nature at all, when somebody gets these things, you recognize that they're afraid and they're protecting something. Like Nikola Tesla said, it's attributed to him. I don't know if he actually said it, but he said every judgment is a confession.
Hmm.
Because if it weren't, what would stop that person who is judging you from coming to you? And like Jesus says in Matthew 18, pull your brother aside. If you got a problem with him, ask him the question, have the conversation. And he goes further. That doesn't work, which is it's fascinating because he doesn't say if he agrees with you. He says if he listens to you. Very different. If he doesn't listen to you, then bring two more. Okay. If he listens to you, great. You have your brother again. If he doesn't listen to you, then bring elders in. He's intentionally keeping the circle small, and it's all about curiosity. Now compare that to how we handle things in our world.
Let me tell you how things need to be. If you listen to me one on one, we're good. If not, let me get two other people who agree with me, and I will tell you how things need to be in our world. And if you listen, good. If not, I will tell
Right?
the whole crowd, and they will stone you and put you out. And
Right.
then look at the lesson that you learned.
Right. Right. Yeah. Or I
Not that you
will
or I have ever lived through any kind of situation like that, ever.
no.
That's,
Or
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 we've done
been
it,
or been part of it. Yeah,
or
yeah,
been
yeah.
part of it.
I don't
No,
I don't
never.
want to leave
We've
that out. I've been
never
part of
done
that.
it. Never.
uh, or there's a Facebook post, or there's a tweet on X, or there's a Instagram post, or there's, all these things of just blast somebody. Like, why? Why? Because you're covering up. You're covering up. I've covered up. We've all covered up with anger. It reminds me of a. Yeah, I'm going to reference Star Wars here. Sorry for people who aren't Star Wars fans. But in Return of the Jedi, Luke is in the Emperor's throne room, I guess you would call it, and Vader's there, and Luke starts to get mad, and the Emperor looks at him and goes, "Your anger betrays you." And ever like I was a little kid when I saw that. I saw that in the theater. And I don't know, what was it, probably 83, 84. So I was 8, 9 years old. Um, that line has stuck with me ever since then. Your anger betrays you. And he's right. Your reaction betrays you. But we can't seem to get that through our heads when we get angry or we get judgmental or we get, critical or whatever the case may be. Like your anger, your response in that moment says more about you than it does about your target.
Yeah.
Hence that lack of self-awareness.
So let's unravel that a little bit. So for people who've never given thought to the fact that it's self-revelatory, how do you actually begin to figure out what is this thing I'm protecting? What is this thing? What does this say about me? What is like, I mean, I work this week. I started recognizing I recognized some patterns, and I'm like, I'm not leaning into this the way that I should. And I don't even know if I know yet exactly what it is that's going on.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the first thing has to be the desire to see. Because you have no desire to see, you're not going to see.
Yeah.
Everything's going to be external. Everything is going to be somebody else's fault. You and I have been in that position. We've been on the other end of that position. Nobody's hands are clean here.
Yep.
But you have to have the desire to see. And what gives us the desire to see? That's the question. Like, how do we get that desire to see?
Within, I mean, I have to think of Hebrews talking about Jesus' perspective on suffering. And is it not much the same way? Is it not a confession that as painful as it will be for whatever shortcoming or failure or whatever it might be to be revealed, that the benefit and the net gain on the other end of it will exceed it? And if it's like you can tell, I mean, isn't this the challenge of life? Isn't this all about how to approach challenges? Like, if the only thing you can see is the challenge, it becomes very difficult to push your way through the challenge.
Right.
But if there's any way that you can expand your way of thinking further out, you can get more perspective, and it can either be this is only a short period of time, or this is building towards this thing that I really want, or when I get to the end, I will have been grateful. Like it's ultimately a fight for a perspective. And it also ties into something a little bit that we talked about last time, which is part of that perspective too is understanding that where shortcomings abound, that love abounds so much more. It's almost like being exposed is the doorway into accepting and knowing love.
Well, earlier in Luke, there Jesus tells that story. He's confronted again, and he says, "Well, let me ask you this." I think it's around the woman. Yeah, it's around the woman who comes in and anoints him, and maybe I might be wrong, but he's like, "Let me ask you this." So let's say there's a guy, and one guy owes him $100, and the other owes 10,000. And out of the, generosity of his heart or whatever, he forgives both. Which one's going to love him more? The one who was forgiven more. He goes, same with her. With this act of love that she did, it covers a multitude of sins. She knows. Nobody had to expose her. She's already exposed. Everybody, when she walked into that room, everybody knew exactly who she was. It's already exposed. She's got nothing to lose. Zacchaeus climbing out on the branch. He's already exposed. He's a tax collector. Everybody already thinks he's the scum of the earth. You got nothing to lose. The leper who approaches him is already isolated from society. Everybody will stay 100 yards away from him, or whatever the rule is, how far you have to stay away. He's already exposed. And then that takes you back to the Sermon on the Mount. Blessed are the poor. Blessed are the meek. Blessed are, those who mourn, all those things. Isn't that what he's saying? You're blessed because now, when you've been exposed, you can actually just truly be loved. You can be known.
It's a very stark contrast between, let's look at, when you think of people who are, for lack of a better term, on fire for Jesus, like if we were to frame that as not as an experience of sheer discipline and willpower and let me see what kind of goal I can set and beat, but as an understanding that my willingness to run headlong into being exposed, being known, going through the fire so that all the things that all of my weaknesses are exposed. And, obviously at a pace that my humanity can handle. And yet being willing to lean into that, being willing to go into the pressure cooker of life where, um, I mean, everybody knows that customer service is, one of the worst places to be in the world because you have all the people with the highest expectations in the worst possible experience and oftentimes in the worst possible state. Um,
Right?
so I'm going to lean into the mess of everything that's going to drive out every part of me that wants to become angry and defensive and reactive and self-reliant and wants me to isolate and hide. And my training isn't going to be like, I mean, maybe my training is let me run 5 miles, 10 miles, a marathon, but there's an equivalent training in which a training of um of the internal of the I don't know what you call it. That's the I'm willing to put myself into these types of situations. What if that would be a picture of what spiritual development and spiritual maturity and spiritual ambition, whatever that should be? What would it look like if that were closer to our understanding?
I can safely say it would be different. It'd be different. Be different. But essentially, what you're saying, well, what if you knew when you made a mistake, be it catastrophic or minor, if you knew that you knew that you knew that when you went and talked about it and shared it, that you would be met with curiosity and questions, correction, certainly, but you would be greeted with that. How more willing would you be to go like, yeah, I messed this up. Yeah.
No, I've worked with companies where you can see the culture, how mistakes are treated. Um, I have a colleague of mine who shared how his employment, they always got one free mistake. If you did something, you had to make a judgment call. It was like just go do what you need to do, and and then we'll figure out afterward how it needs to happen going forward. And certainly if you and certainly this can turn into some kind of weird, I don't know what. This can also be weaponized against people, but what it was intended as was a freedom where if something isn't spelled out, we don't care what you do, just go do it. And we can always figure out later what this needs to look like going forward. That was the
Right.
intent. Um, there are other and contrasted with other places where it's like if you don't know the right thing to do, you can't do it because if you happen to make the wrong judgment call, it's going to be on you. And there's no
You're
back
paralyzed.
paralyzed. There's no backing from the company. And there's no individual who wants to take a company-sized risk. No employee who wants to take a company-sized risk. Like
Right.
that's
Right.
lunacy.
Right.
Um, and other times too, just where it's obvious that um, the other places where it's very clear where people have open communication with leadership where the whoever's leading may not agree but has an open door and will give an ear versus other places where things that are expressed are not heard,
Hmm.
are not, and it's beyond not acted upon. It's we don't hear you.
Right.
Um,
You don't matter.
you don't matter.
Yeah. Years ago, I worked at Target overnight shift, 10:30 at night to 7 in the morning. They used to have these, they'd pull certain people from the team out, and you'd sit down with the store manager, and he'd ask you all sorts of questions and what could we improve? What's working? What's not working? I remember being in one, and I didn't want to say anything, but he asked me directly. And so I gave him something. And he went directly to my manager and, you know, cussed him out essentially for what was happening. And then my manager came back to me. Was like, "Why'd you say?" Da, 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 da. I was like, "I was asked a question directly. I answered it directly." Like, what use is that conversation? Like, the next time I'm in that, you ask me a question, I'm just gonna be like, "Everything's fine,
Right.
no problems." And it's countercultural too, because like think about some of the parables that Jesus tells. The parable of the talents. This guy makes the safe play and buries the talent. The others go out and risk it, and they get reward. They double his money, whatever the case may be. And he has the most harsh criticism for the one that buried it.
Mm.
And he says, like, I knew you were a hard man who reaps where he hasn't sown, and all that kind of stuff. And he looks at me and goes, "Oh, so you know I'm a harsh man who reaps where he isn't sows. Like you could have just deposited with a bank and at least gotten interest. Now take that and give it to the other guy, the risk taker, or the servant who gets called into the boss's office and is like, "Hey, what about these accounts? And you've mismanaged this money." Da, da, da. So like he goes out and he starts making deals. Says, that was kind of shrewd of him,
Mhm.
or being as innocent as doves and as wise as serpents. Explain that one to me. Take all of these teachings and tell me what I should do.
Well,
If it's not talking about what you're talking about, the freedom, the agency, the free will to make a choice and learn from it.
yeah, the ex and not just. I mean, not to take away agency, but the expectation to do that.
Right.
And I mean, I think that the challenge, the conditioning of being in a controlled environment, you look at the impact of people's lives who've grown up in very controlled environments and their relationship with risk, even if they are innate risk takers, and how deeply that risk taking can become. Because I mean, it's, everybody has their 2020 insight. Like you take a risk and it doesn't end right. Well, of course you should have seen this. Well, then why
Right.
didn't you why don't you have higher prediction beforehand of what's going to work and whatnot? Like you're gonna
Right.
either tell me no to everything and then miss the big opportunity, or you're gonna say yes to every whatever. Like you're not that much better. Um, but that framing ends up being incredibly debilitating. And you compare that with
Right.
people who have been in environments where the outcome really didn't matter.
Yeah.
Like, did this work or not? It was okay, you took a risk and you're putting yourself out there and you're learning lessons. And so
Yeah.
you're in the game moving forward.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and look at the history of people who are men after God's own heart or women after God's own heart. Catastrophic failures. Moses killed a dude. There's all sorts of things. They're like David, you know, like
Yeah.
Abraham tried to sell his wife twice to
Yeah, these are
Pharaoh.
exactly like, oops, that was an accident kind of moments. Like,
No, no. Peter comes eye to eye with Jesus, like just after he's denied him. I don't know that guy. No, no, no. Your accent seems to be the same. I don't know that guy. I don't know what you're talking about. Are you sure? I don't know that guy. And then eye to eye with him. Come on. Tell me about this one. So is it Rahab, the prostitute who hides the spies in
yeah.
Jericho? Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
She lies. She hides them. When they come around looking for him, nah, I don't know. I haven't seen him. They must be the other side of town. Then helps him escape. Now later on, she's blessed because of it. Figure that one out for me. I'm just asking a question here. I'm not making a judgment. I'm just saying, like, figure that one out for me. A man after your own heart? Really? Really? The guy who saw the woman, wanted her for himself, then has his best friend killed.
Yeah.
That's a man after your own heart. There's got to be something deeper going on here.
Well, I mean, it's bizarre. There's this deep addiction to perfection as
Right.
humans. Like,
Right.
like if there's one thing out of this conversation that we could annihilate for like if you could annihilate this hunger and drive to be perfect, um, like most of these other things end up being solved.
Mm-hmm. My best friend for 25, 30 years. I kid you not. Every time I say some sort of self-effacing thing about myself, he has the same response every time. Me too. All of us. Every time. That guy knows everything about my life. The good, the bad, the ugly, the hidden, the everything. He knows everything. Why? And it's not like he's never suggested or challenged or corrected or anything like that with me. He has many times. But every time, me too. All of us. None of us have our hands clean. Anybody who pretends to, stay away from him.
I mean, I have to think of what Jesus said about Jesus being tempted in every way, and that's a very sanitized Sunday school version. Like, okay, yeah, Jesus wanted to lie about the candy bar that obviously they didn't have candy bars, but whatever. Like,
Let's just pretend. I really wish they did.
hey, I mean, this would be
To
a
have
very
a
interesting.
payday, it would have been great.
And what would Jesus' favorite candy
Right.
bar have been?
Now we're getting into the territory with like how many angels could dance on the head of a pin,
Well,
like this could
exactly.
go really far afield.
Um,
I interrupted you. Sorry, you were talking about
it's
the
all
candy
good.
bars.
We've just so sanitized it.
Right.
Like Jesus was this, like, yes, he was God, and yet he fully lived the human experience. I think about, I think one of the things that is very interesting, one of the things that's very interesting to me is to look at the mental state and the mental health of people that we consider to be highly successful. And
Right.
there's multiple reasons for this. And I would be very curious to hear more of your thoughts on this. But I think we immediately assume that if you have any kind of negative thought, despair, whatever, that there must be something fundamentally broken with you. And there's a reality in which brains are hardwired for safety. And when you're pushing the limits, there is a screaming of your brain that says, don't do this. And if you continue to persist for any period of time, it will screen for safety on an ongoing basis. And I don't understand. I'm a mental health professional. I don't understand the places in which your brain's wild resistance to what's going on is just the normal reaction to safety seeking, and how much ends up being some other thing. But the mental
Right.
angst that people learn to tolerate as they're like, what do you
And
make
what
of
does it cause them to do?
what does it cause them to do? And
What's their response to it?
and I think, I mean, I mean, there's so many different responses. I think in early days, you're like, there's something wrong with me that I'm experiencing this, or I should not do this because there's so much resistance around it. Or there's I got to put out the fire. Like this is an ache,
Yeah.
and like, and that's kind of where the becomes the I can't find the right word, but like that's where addiction and addictive behaviors and
Yes.
coping
The
mechanisms come into
the
place.
numbing comes in.
The numbing. But somewhere
Mm.
there's this place in which there's this acceptance, this knowing, this, I don't know exactly what it looks like. Um, in some ways it doesn't ease the pain,
For anything but
but
a short period of time.
for anything but a short period of time.
But let's not pretend like it doesn't ease the pain. It's just duration.
Sure, but there can be like, is there an answer besides
Mm,
just increasing pain tolerance? A healthy answer?
I don't think so. I think it's resilience, and I think psychological studies, anecdotal experiences tell us that resilience is the key to being a healthy human being. To be emotionally healthy, it's how much truth can you stand in front of and not run away. And it's not like you're born with that. It's
No.
learning to stand in the presence of truth and allow it to humble you.
But why people talk about imposter syndrome as very freely.
Mhm.
People do not talk about the mental anguish and angst of diving headlong into new ventures that absolutely terrify you,
Right,
and the deep instinct to turn around and run
right,
or cope in some way.
right.
Or am I just not in the right places?
No, no, no. I think you're onto something. Like what pops into my mind is the Jonah story. He's a prophet. He's been given. Sorry, I just pet my cat and got his hair in my mouth. This is good. This is good video right here. This is must see TV. You're getting the real stuff.
It's the real stuff.
Yeah, and God says, "Hey, I want you to go to Nineveh. I want you to tell them something for me." And Jonah's like, "Nope." Runs. I'm
Yeah.
out until it gets too miserable.
Yeah.
It gets too miserable. And I think this kind of goes back to the question you were asking earlier, like how do you get to that point? It's like until you get too miserable.
Right.
And some people will never get there. And it's the grace of God, I think, the misery. I honestly believe that. Like it's the grace of God that the misery mounts and mounts and mounts to the place where you go, I can't handle this anymore. It's the rock bottom, that they talk about in addiction. It's the end of your rope that Paul talks about. Like it's all those things where I recognize I can't do this. Can't do it. That you come back and you go, okay, I've been broken. I've been broken. I heard this I heard this guy talking once and he asked the question, what's the difference between a good man and a bad man? He said man, could have been person. What's the difference between a good person and a bad person? And everybody was like giving their suggestions, and it probably went on for 5 minutes. And he said, no, all of you are wrong. Very self-assured man in front of a crowd of people. It's very Tony Robbins-esque. And he goes, the difference between a good man and a bad man is what they run to.
Mm.
That's the difference. You run to God, you're gonna get your correction, you're gonna get your refinement, you're gonna get all these things. And you have the guts to stand face to face with the truth and not run. That's the difference, I think.
Yeah.
Now, like you were talking about, business leaders, like let's take the example of being president. No sane person would want that job.
No.
No. Imagine, even in the best case scenario, let's say you win 60% of the vote. So 60% of the country is on your side. That means 40% of the people are not on your side.
Yes. And of those, I mean, certainly there's some who will be only nominally opposed, but of those, there's a not insignificant number that are vocally, vehemently opposed to the point of
Right.
vilifying and demonizing you.
Especially within the last 20, 30 years.
Yes, correct.
Yeah, within the last 20. I would probably say since, now that we don't need to get political, 20 or 30 years, where it's like it doesn't matter who you are or what you say or what type of person you are, you're on the other side, you are evil incarnate. And I have to do everything in my power to thwart every last thing that you do. Now, what kind of person can stand in the presence of that for 4 years straight? It's not like it's 5 days a week, 8 to 5, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for 4 years.
Well, this is on top of intense, like, it's not just like, it's intense really getting stuff done. It's not just mm, I've got a few things I need to get done, and the rest of the time I'm
Right.
golfing to solve the mental health angst. Like,
Right. Or think about a CEO. Same thing, head of a major corporation. Consistently, you're going to be second guessed and triple guessed and criticized and da 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 da, all that kind of stuff. What type of personality does it take to be in that position?
well, I haven't seen this before. I stay out of the news, but I was pulling up Inc. articles recently. They're treating CEOs now like celebrities. Like, let's disassemble them. Say how awful they are. Let's criticize their opinion. The fact that they asked for help over here from this other person, wow, that's terrible. Like, are they regressing? And just the level of, and I'm kind of calling out Inc. because I mean that's only because those were the articles that popped up, and it's whatever. This is not not trying to throw any one person under the bus here. It's like increasingly it used to be that the people in leadership in those roles were, okay, you might not agree, but to really come out that boldly and call them out on their decisions in the name of accountability, like and from people who you question the foundation of their perspective, like do you really have you're just saying this because you've got a certain grid through which you see the world,
Right.
that you have a message to promote, not because you've walked in these shoes or you've even walked in parts of these shoes. Like it's very
Right.
bizarre, honestly.
Controversial take incoming.
Go for it.
What about the CEO pastor who's built this organization, this whole edifice, and then falls, and the vilifying of that person? There's plenty to be said, and it's been said already, so I'm not going to retread it, about the horrible things that have happened in the name of that. Hands down, of course. But can you take responsibility for putting them on that pedestal in the first place? No man can handle that. No human being can handle that kind of power.
Well, and when I think about, let me just think about the ways that I personally have done that. Like I mean, it's very, very simple, and but it all starts with it's like, I mean, this goes way back to the beginning of the conversation around the ache, is when you believe that the ache can be solved,
Bringing it back.
bringing
We're
it
bringing it
back.
back.
Like when you believe the ache can be solved externally in some way. I bought the books. I went to the conferences. I I I sought out the videos of these wild, words of knowledge that are just mind-blowing. And because it validated something inside of me, it was a cure, it was a promise of a cure of an ache. And and on the other side, even without knowing it, you can very easily build it. Celebrity status in any capacity is very soothing to the ache.
Well, if the greatest human fear, which I personally believe is to be greatest human fear is to be alone, abandoned, rejected, then the celebrity, whether it's a CEO or a athlete or a musician or a political figure, whatever, you have all these people voting for you, buying your records, buying tickets to go to the games. Like it is it's the addiction. It's
Yeah.
the soothing of it, and it insulates you. It separates you from reality.
So in a crazy scenario, let's say 5 years from now, a million people listen to this conversation. What would you want the Kevin
Oh
then to
God,
know?
no, please,
No, but like,
please no.
what would you want the Kevin then to know or remember?
I would, and obviously I'm saying this here, projecting out there, but don't take yourself too seriously.
Yeah.
You're not that important. Don't take yourself too seriously. Be able to laugh at yourself. Be the guy who was petting his cat who got his hair in his mouth in the middle of your second episode.
I love it.
Don't take yourself too seriously. Like you have to like there has to be a humility around it, and if there's not a humility around it, then it's going to get really, really messy. You get enough people telling you how great you are, it's intoxicating. I don't
Yeah.
care. You can sit here and say, "Oh, not me, not me."
Um,
Whatever. Whoever. The only person who could do that is Jesus, and he did it, and we're not capable of that.
Well, you can even make the argument that Jesus proactively fought against it. He disappeared from the crowds. He ran away when they sought to crown him.
They wanted
He
to make him king. He's like, no, that's not why I'm here.
and so there's a format, but I mean, when the crowds showed up, he preached and then he disappeared. And it seems to me like this is again reading beyond the text, but that some of this must have had to have been a detox of that was a moment. That's not my life. That's not my essence. That's not they want something out of me that well, and I guess he also saw the end of where this because there is a doesn't the crowning this is a little bit of the paradox. How's this? But there's the crowning. If you allow them to crown you, they will then execute you.
Yeah,
And if you allow them to execute you, then many times posthumously there ends up being a crowning. Um,
right.
and it's very, man, it's sobering to think about that.
Yeah, yeah, it is. In the book of Revelation, the elders are standing before the throne, and it says they're casting their crowns down. It's just such a reversal. Most of us are trying to put them on
Yeah.
to be loved, to be lovable, whatever the case may be. The human weakness of that, seeking power and that kind of thing. But they're casting them down. This is useless. This is useless. Solomon says it in Ecclesiastes. Vanity, vanity, all a chasing after the wind. So, teacher, what's good? At the end of the day, fear God, follow his commandments. That's it.
Run to him.
That's what's good.
Yeah.
Interesting. So what is our purpose? We've got two paths. One of my favorite teachers, his name's Marty Solomon. He has a podcast called BEMA, BEMA. It's fabulous if you haven't listened to it. It's a wonderful podcast. But he talks about the dynamic in the Old Testament is empire and shalom. It's like you could follow empire with the purpose we're talking about, make yourself lovable, all never satisfied, always working, exhaustion, all that kind of stuff, or shalom, which is peace. Nothing missing, nothing broken. Following him, sitting at his feet like Mary did. You have two choices. So if your purpose is union with God, great purpose. Doesn't mean perfect life. It doesn't mean everything's going to go smoothly. In fact, history tells us it doesn't go very smoothly, but there's peace in the storm
Yeah.
because you know who you are and whose you are. This one, you're always fighting for identity to prove yourself, and it never, ever, ever stops. I think that's the ache.
And like this is the part where it's the here and now of the kingdom. It's every line of regret. I mean, people talk about what's the biggest regret people have at the end of their life. It's generally not having invested as much into their relationships as they wish they would have.
Yes.
And the answer to fulfillment is not an achievement because achievement always implies distance from fulfillment. Like there's always something between me and fulfillment, and there
Right.
always will be. And the here and now is of finding peace because that peace is like it is the answer. You can either chase the answer or you can be in the answer.
Right. C.S. Lewis said something along the lines of, and I'm paraphrasing, but he said, hell is a monument to human self determination. You want to choose that? You get to. You get to. But what you're going to get in the Great Divorce, I love how he pictures it, what hell looks like. People completely and utterly separated from each other and isolated, self-inflicted isolation. And you just get further and further and further away. Because at the end of self-determination, if that's your highest goal, the end result is narcissism. It's all about me and how it affects me.
Yeah.
Like Jordan Peterson talks about your highest values, and it became really big in psychology recently. Like you could start there, like identify what your highest value is, and then we can go from there. And from a foundation of faith, true faith. I personally, my opinion, I'm sure there could be others. I think the highest values we can have is curiosity and courage.
Hmm.
Because curiosity will lead us to the truth, and courage will give us the strength to accept it.
I've always looked at those from the perspective of if you take love as the highest value, those rest directly underneath it because curiosity is needed for the knowing and courage is needed for the being known.
Hmm. Yeah, I like that a lot. Yeah, that's good.
And so I
That's
view
good.
that much as this, I mean, these are like if love is the coin, these are the sides of it.
Yeah, yeah. And let's just be honest, all of us fall well short of it quite often.
Yeah.
The curiosity and the courage part. Maybe the purpose is to grow in those, grow in curiosity, grow in courage, and thus grow in knowing and being known.
Well, and I think that's a very interesting approach of like, I mean, I think fundamentally about, I feel like this is the damaging confession. I feel like I have a curiosity about all kinds of things, but and sometimes around people, my curiosity just kind of disappears. Like, and I feel terrible.
Yeah,
I'm like,
right.
because I know that I like to say, here's what I like to say, and I would love to spin this in a way that makes me sound good. I'll just say that. I, and I would like to say that the basic problem is that most people are boring. Um, let's externalize the problem, shall we?
Yeah,
But but I think one of the marks of a true friend and the person who's friends with everybody is the person. Okay, there is the raging extrovert who tells everybody about themselves.
right.
Whatever, great. But then there are the people who are obsessively curious about the people around them, about any aspect of that person's life that that person finds interesting. Your
Yeah.
cat, um, your
Something.
something like,
I'm a to dovetail off what you're saying. Like I am a dyed in the wool like introvert from the very beginning. I was taught growing up the world outside is very dangerous and you need to be suspicious of everybody's motives and so like very closed off. And I over the years and I think teaching and then the work that I've done working with people like has brought this out of me where I can sit across from somebody and have those conversations and feel comfortable, but in the beginning it was so painful. But one of the things I used to love to ask people in social situations and, in work situations is tell me something I don't know about yourself, about you, because I'm interested. I'm curious. Tell me something I don't know. And I don't know where I got that from, if I heard it from somebody or if it just popped into my head. But when I first started saying that, I was absolutely fascinated by the vulnerable answers I would get.
Mm.
Like they would like, "Oh, you were actually interested in me? Oh, well, here's something you don't know," and just be fascinated by it.
Yeah.
Like people are so utterly fascinating.
Yes. Well, and I think most people, if you can get past the guards, um, I mean, you and I have talked about some of my experiences in various forms of cold calling, and like that is a like people immediately have a high protective mechanism in place.
Yeah.
But if you can just get past that initial piece and show a genuine interest in them and their situation, it's crazy the amount of, I mean, I've had, I mean, this says more about the person than it does about me, but I've had, I've cold called people and had them talk about their financial problems. They talked about losing their parent. They talked about
Oh,
like all of these really bizarre stuff
it's
within,
as if we have this drive to be known.
as if we have this drive to be exactly, exactly.
Mhm.
But then you also see other people who are conditioned very much to believe that the world is a dangerous place.
Yeah.
Everybody's out to get you. And
Yep.
if I don't have a name on your caller ID, then you're a schlep and a scam artist. And like there is no possible way to have a conversation.
You just described my upbringing. I still don't answer phone calls unless the name pops up. Like, and I see who's calling. I don't answer the phone call unless it's that. And I'm like, yeah, they can leave a message if they want to get hold of me. They leave a message, then I'll respond. But like, I still don't answer. I still don't answer phone calls unless I know who it's coming from.
Well, and you know, this also partially just comes from a very pragmatic time. You know, let's not waste each other's time. Um, let's not have time wasted.
Right, right. Should we land this plane?
We should land this plane. All right. Well, it's very interesting, I think, to come full circle to, I don't know, is there any, let's do this. Is there anything from this conversation that for you yourself, you want to take into this coming week and you're like, I want to carry this nugget with me and ponder this some more?
Yeah, well, what you said about love being the foundation or the coin and curiosity and courage being each side of it, like I want to wrestle with that. I mean, objectively, it just strikes me as true, but I want to dig into that deeper.
Okay. And I think for me, the big thing, one of the big things for me was it was just the realization of um, standing the courage to stand in front of truth, and some very specific things that I'm working through right now. And the thing I want to wrestle with is pragmatically in my life, in these situations, what does it mean for me to stand unflinching in the face of truth around this? And also it's that, and also how do I increase my resilience and my pain tolerance? And how do I stop running? This is just this bold face affront of comfort seeking, safety seeking, and
Yeah,
just a decision not some kind of hurrah to just massively push through it, but just recognizing that and leaning in and walking forward and taking steps forward. It's a really
yeah,
a big piece for me.
yeah. Yeah, that risk-taking element for me as well. Now that you mention it, and what does that look like in standing in the presence of things that are uncomfortable, and how does that play out in my life, and what can I glean from that?
Yeah.
That's a big one as well for all of us. But me in this conversation and big picture, yeah, what does it look like to be an introvert and to prefer like solitude and yet engage with people, and it's risky and all that kind of stuff, like play with that dynamic. Because I mean, honestly, like I would be good if I had, a handful of friends and my dog. And in a pinch, just me and my dog.
Well, I mean, books you can close up and set down. People are a little bit harder to deal with than that.
Right. Exactly. Oh, it reminds me of that. There's a story of Carl Jung, and we can wrap up on this, but guy comes to him, very successful, influential, businessman, works 14-hour days, that kind of thing. He's got some depression, that kind of stuff comes to him. He says, okay, have this meeting, first meeting, he goes, okay, I want you to intentionally limit your workday to 8 hours. And I want you to go home right after work, and I want you to spend an hour in silence. Okay. Month goes by, comes back. How'd it go? Well, I limited my workday to 8 hours. Went straight home, spent time by myself, and but the depression, anxiety, it's still there. And he goes, okay, what'd you do in that time by yourself? He's like, oh, I would read this novel, I'd listen to this, opera, whatever case may be. He goes, you weren't by yourself. You weren't by yourself. Like solitude is sitting in the presence of that truth and not running away and allowing it to shape you. And for somebody who's in love with books and has been my whole life, some of my best friends have been the authors that I've read. A very vulnerable statement to make right there. Like that's a tough pill to swallow.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
All right. Well, fantastic.
Yeah.
So, to all you guys listening, subscribe where you like. Join us. Drop a comment in the respective places, and looking forward to taking you guys on our journey next time.
Awesome.
All right.
All right. See you, my friend.
Yep. See ya.